So here you go. We've got basically a flame. And you know, honestly, if you wanted to make a campfire, if you wanted to make a candle or a cigarette or whatever, something with flame, you would actually do all the same steps that we've done so far. And I mean everything. I mean the mountain thing, the noise, the temperature, the burn, the everything, because that's what we have here. We have a flame. You know, we'd work on it more, but those are, whether we're doing an explosion or we're doing regular flame, to this point, it's all the same. Now, going forward from here, we're gonna diverge, if you will, into just the explosion territory. In order to do that, we need to use divergence. Divergence is a thing where, I'm gonna click that so I can keep this flip book around actually. Divergence means that I know that you are a regular liquid sim, which again, this is essentially a liquid sim. It is a liquid sim, but divergence means that you can kind of break the rules of being a regular liquid sim. If you pour water into something, into a jar, you know, it flows around, much like how smoke would if you shot smoke into a jar, but it doesn't expand or contract. Liquid doesn't anyway, not water. Gas-based things do though. So flame, or just hot air in general, can expand and contract. So that's what divergence lets us do. We need to, there's a thing that you can track in a pyrosim called divergence, and it's basically just another volume that you add in. And the higher those values are, the more it is allowed to explode out. If you put negative divergence in, it will actually suck and compress down onto a point, which you can use to do a suction kind of effect. So let's add in some divergence. I'm gonna just say plus here. And we're gonna use that burn. Same place that we want the flame to come in is the same place that I want it to kind of explode out. And divergence, well, let's just see it first. If I press play, in fact, I should keep this, the pyro post process, the one that's in the one thing here. I'm gonna keep this here so that we can see the nice pyro post process one. And I'm gonna work on our sim here in this other one. Anyway, so here we are, we've added some divergence in. And do we see anything? Nothing obvious. Often a good idea to do crazy numbers to make sure that something's working. Okay, well, it's definitely working. So we can see it's exploding out in a horrible fashion. Doesn't actually look very good, does it? Let's bring it down to like 100. It's still pretty intense. Let's just do like 10 for now. So it's not bad. So we can see it is expanding out, and then, you know, everything else is still taking effect, where we still have the buoyancy, it's still moving up, and et cetera, and so on. So we know that it's working. The way we add it in to our sim, looking at this side now, by default it just says add. Honestly, it doesn't really matter. The reason why it doesn't matter is because divergence isn't tracked from frame to frame. Temperature, flame, density, you know, it all gets added in and then it gets moved and it still exists from frame to frame. But if you look at the divergence visualizer here, it doesn't move. This is just what it looks like on the frame that it came in, and then it's thrown out every single frame. So it doesn't really matter how it gets added in. You could do a max or an add, whatever, doesn't matter. And in that same manner, we just want the values that we're putting in to be the values that we're putting in. So turn off use time step, because what use time step is doing is it's trying to say, let's say you're adding smoke in every frame. Like in a normal, the way we've been doing things, we're gonna add 10 density in every frame. What can happen is if you are doing multiple substeps, as we will do later, actually quite soon, what we'll want to do is say, well, don't add in 10 density every substep, because then if we have two substeps, we'll end up adding in 20 density per frame. All of a sudden, we were just trying to do more detail in the solve, but we didn't mean to add twice as much stuff in. So this volume source thing has this use time step, which is usually on by default and is good and fine. But in our case, with the divergence, by default, it really shouldn't be on. So I'm gonna put this back to 1 anyway for now, to keep our sims running quickly. But we don't want to divide these values down. But I don't want there to be, every time I add more substeps, I don't want there to be less divergence being added into the sim, which is what will happen. It'll be less and less explosive the more substeps we do. So turn that off. That's all we really need to know about that. Okay. So it's looking cool with, it's got kind of that more classical bulb flame base now, which is kind of nice. Something we can do while we're here is we can press D in the viewport and go to texture, and you can turn off limit resolution. And you know what, maybe I'll save this for later. It's kind of hard to tell right now. But this will just simply make the resolution in the viewport higher. It'll just look nicer if you have a nice graphics card, but we can't even tell the difference right now. So don't worry about it. Forget I said anything. So that's it. That's it for divergence. Sweet.